One question in already, which is on my phone, very modern of me. Will AI and humans always remain separate, or will we merge? So I guess start with you, Alan. So you're sort of saying that you think that we probably will merge and that'll be a good thing.
Well, I think we'll augment ourselves. We'll take on a lot of AI, we'll get more advanced. But I think there's also the chance that AI will become a life form on its own that won't be connected to humans. So a dual species, if you like.
I don't know if I do like, actually. Calum, what do you think?
I think fundamentally we always have to remember we don't currently know, but and what Alan says is entirely possible. I think that we should hope that doesn't happen in the long run, because if and when we get superintelligence, and I think we will, it won't be a very comfortable position to be the second smartest species on the planet, and by a very long way. Chimps are only a little bit less smart than us, actually, and their future is entirely dependent on what we do. They have no say in whether they survive or not. I think we need to merge with the superintelligence and become a joint superintelligence ourselves. That way, our future is magnificent, wonderful beyond belief. I think the alternatives are less good.
But what about the effect on jobs? Again, Alan, you touched on this and said that realistically in the future you probably would lose your job in a warehouse as a consequence of robotics and AI developments. But what jobs will be left for us? What jobs will humans always? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, that's why I had to point out that not all creative jobs are going to be safe, but there's definitely going to be an element of humans that needs to be involved. I think in any process, even in your job, that it may not be that we need as many people, but there will definitely need to be a human element, I think, in anything we do. And I also think you're right in terms of we need to partner up. We need to find a way to work together so that no one feels like they are falling by the wayside and they just don't have any need to live anymore if robots are just going to take all our jobs. We've sort of grown up with a mentality that we go to school, we work, we have a career, and if artificial intelligence comes, where does that go, that idea?
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting, Calum. So is it a question then of just recalibrating how we think about our lives and work? So in the future, if there aren't jobs and effectively you just have, or aren't jobs for everyone, is it just a question of those people then readjusting and having lives where either work is totally redefined or they just have lives that are almost like play?
Yes, I think there's a massive adjustment to be made if and when we get to the point where a huge minority, perhaps a majority, and perhaps everyone isn't able to work anymore because computers, machines can do our jobs better than we can. We will obviously need a universal basic income, some way of getting money to everybody, but we'll also need to find things that make our lives meaningful. At the moment, although jobs are often a bit of a bore for a lot of people, for many people they are what give our lives meaning. And we'll need work of some form. It might be creative expression, it might be scientific exploration. We'll need to find things that we do that give our lives meaning. And we'll also need a new economic system, because we can't have a world, we can't live safely in a world where a small minority of people own everything. So there's a lot of adjustment to be done. And the reason why I think this is a great day is that we need to be thinking about these things now. It's not that far in the future where this stuff may happen.
And I guess the worrying thing is who makes those big decisions.
Yeah.
Well, at the moment...
Anyone? Anyone want to make the big decisions? I mean, currently it's, well, maybe it's politicians, but it's probably tech companies, isn't it? That are...
At the moment, nobody's making the decisions. And to be honest, at the moment, they don't need to be made, because we're not at the point where machines are taking over all our jobs. There's a big debate going on about whether the economy is being hollowed out, and particularly in the States, whether the sort of middle class jobs are disappearing through automation. If it is happening, and I don't really think it is yet, but if it is, it's only at the very early stages. Politicians think in 5 years. They don't think in 10 or 20 years, and frankly, we don't really ask them to. But when we get self-driving cars, when we get domestic robots, when we get Siri to be an entity that we can have a conversation with, then people are going to wake up and start worrying about it, then the politicians will wake up, and the sooner we can make that happen, Even if we only bring it forward a year or two, the sooner we can make it happen, the longer we have to discuss it and get to sensible answers.
And then I guess we get into that problem you're talking about, Moore's law, that it's happening exponentially quickly.
Yeah.
So the longer we wait, the further advance is going to be, and the harder it will be to kind of do anything about it if we don't like where we've ended up, right?
Exactly.
Positive thing. Anyone want to ask a question from the floor? Yes, lady down.
Hang on.
Down
Is
here.
the mic?
So with the whole thing about artificial intelligence, how do we make sure that it isn't corrupted by like governments? Because if they're corrupt people, say like North Korea, how do we make sure that they don't create something like a super soldier? I mean, if we look at things such as unmanned aerial vehicles at the moment, they're used to target terrorism, but they also have had major consequences on innocent people, such as like in the last year, I think there's been the killing of 1,100 innocent civilians in the case to tackle terrorism. And that's unmanned aerial vehicles are drones which you control them from a completely separate country. Like some of them are controlled in the UK, some of them are controlled in America, and they fly over the Middle East and things like that.
Well, first of all, are North Korea making a super soldier? And if so, should we know about it? Secondly, is there a danger of, basically this technology being in the wrong people's hands? What do you think, Alan?
Well, I mean, there's always that danger. I mean, I think it's Bill Gates was warning about developing AI for that purpose of war, and then it would have a bent towards destroying life. But I think ultimately, like anything, I mean, we've made bombs and things before, and we've survived. So I don't know how we'll do it, but I don't think we'll destroy ourselves in the process.
And I guess it sort of comes back to that point that you made, Calum, which is that we can't really stop the advance of AI. Whatever can happen in AI will happen. It will happen quickly.
Yeah.
So therefore, we just need to try and monitor it, I suppose.
We do. And I'm less cynical than you about politicians. I think many politicians are actually people of goodwill. There are corrupt ones, but I think most of them are trying, broadly speaking, to do the right thing because they're people, just like us. And I'll throw a challenge back to you. You say killer robots is a bad thing. When robots get to the point where they can discriminate better between a civilian and a combatant, and that's not far off, who do you want pulling the trigger? Somebody who you know is going to get it wrong 50% of the time, the soldier who may be wounded and is stressed and can't quite be sure what's going on around him or her, or a robot which just gets it right all the time. I'd rather have the robot pull the trigger. Now, that's an unpopular opinion at the moment, and as you say, Bill Gates and a whole lot of other people signed a letter saying we should never let robots pull the trigger, have the kill decision. But actually, I'd rather have the creature which makes the best decision make the decision, just like with driving cars. Google's cars have driven well over 1 million miles now in California. They haven't caused a single accident. There's no human who's driven 1 million miles and not caused an accident.
But I have to challenge you. Oh, sorry.
What about the role of transparency in the decision-making processes? I would contend that there's the one classic question about the self-driving car. If it's going down the road and if it keeps going at the current speed, it's going to kill 20 school children, but if it veers off to the left, it's guaranteed to kill you. Should it make that decision? And then whether it's a war machine or a self-driving car or any other intelligent piece of technology, I contend, and I'd like to know what you think, that these decision algorithms have to be made open and completely clear. Otherwise, if we live in a world of secret decisions and one organization builds things one way and another way, we can never know. That's a scary future to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you were speaking and you basically brought up my point, artificial intelligence doesn't have the same empathy or understanding or ability to make a conscious decision. It makes a right or wrong decision based on the information it has. So I wouldn't argue that that's safer. I think that's actually more scary because you can't expect it to think about all the other variables. It just has it's right or it's wrong. And when we put our driving decisions into artificial intelligence, I don't know if you've seen the video, but there's actually a video of the self-driving car, and the guy is so confident this car is going to do exactly what it's supposed to do, and he stands while it just drives straight into him. So that's us believing that artificial intelligence can control some things in our lives for us.
It didn't hit him, did it?
Oh, it hit. Yeah, no, it did hit him. I believe it
Self-driving
did.
car hit somebody.
Yeah, I wish I had the video, because of course it's my word.
Everyone's Googling
right
it now.
Yeah, I think you should, because it's a perfect example of how we trust robots so much to make our decisions for us when they could potentially cause more of an accident than a human being. But again, it's just about building a good relationship between artificial intelligence and humans so we can trust them enough.
I suppose the kind of flip side of that is that with the self-driving cars, which is kind of a good example, that there may be accidents with self-driving cars, but will there be less accidents than with human drivers? And I think that's probably the main consideration. Is it better than the current situation?
Yeah.
Objectively, in terms of casualties and so on. And the other, the clever thing about, well, one of the clever things about self-driving cars is, as I understand it, they're all kind of linked. So anything that happens, any incident that it hasn't experienced itself before, but that another car has, it learns from. So that it's like a sort of community of self-driving cars. Is this? Am I talking nonsense, Calum?
It is entirely possible to do that with self-driving cars, and that is clearly what's going to happen. And in the long run, when we have self-driving cars, we'll need far fewer of them, because we won't all own our own car, which sits in a garage 99% of its life and sits in traffic jams a lot of the rest of the time. We'll have a much smaller population of cars which are always on the move, always know where each other is, don't need traffic lights, don't cause traffic jams, cause a lot less pollution. The evidence is overwhelmingly that self-driving cars are better than human-driven cars. And to your point, Mr. Moustache, you're quite right. Decisions will have to be made about if a car is facing a situation where, probably through no fault of its own, it can either kill a child, or it can kill 5 adults, or it can kill the driver. Somebody's going to have to program into the car the decision, which of those options it takes. And there will be programmers, human programmers, at least in the early stages, who make those decisions. And you're quite right, those decisions should be surfaced and they should be open. We're going to find that an incredibly uncomfortable debate to be having, but we have to. I rather like the idea that you have a switch in your car where you can be more or less aggressive or more or less self-damaging. So,
flick a switch. I don't like kids. Just bear that in mind.
A nice person has the switch set so that if you're going to kill the child, no, you call the driver instead. And a nasty person has it says, I don't care how many people out there you kill, you save me.
I mean, it's an idea. Any other questions? Quite hard to. Yes, at the back up there.
But that's an interesting point. What should politicians, Calum, you mentioned politicians should be having a debate and discussing things. What should they be talking about? Because it's fine to move away and say, we need to be thinking about this, politicians, people, etc. But what? What are the debates, what are the discussions that should be happening now?
Right now, they should be educating themselves. I mean, this is an appalling thing to say, but of course they should read my book.
I think the thing that it comes down to that's really tricky is that there's a sort of need to be like morally or ethically absolute, which is very difficult. So you need to kind of say, like, be those programmers going, actually, I value this life slightly more than that life, or I value this thing over that. And I think we're quite bad at that, and I don't think there are many moral absolutes, and I don't really know how you.
We already do that in some situations. We cost the value of a life to know whether to make drugs available on the NHS. So there's a thing called QALY, which is the Quality of Adjusted Life Year. And we don't make a drug available freely on the NHS unless it increases the number of QALYs more than the amount of money that it costs.
I think we have a question.
Okay, so during this moral discussion about what the robot would decide, I couldn't help but think of the video game series of Portal, in which the laboratory where it's all set is all maintained by this supercomputer robot called GLaDOS, which, however, gets a glitch in the system and becomes a sociopath, psychopath, which kills people just for fun. So I'm wondering, how high do you think is the risk of something like that happening to an artificial intelligence, where it develops a sociopathic streak within its coding?
Alan?
Well, it's definitely possible. If I remember right, GLaDOS had cores on it, didn't it, to regulate its morality that were corrupted, that caused that glitch in the game. So that's a human intervention, if you like, that's gone wrong. It could happen. I'm not saying it couldn't, but I don't think it would.
Could you get a sociopathic glitch? I suppose that's the... that's the...
As Alan says, there's no reason, no conceptual reason why that couldn't happen. Don't think it's particularly likely, but it could happen. And because there's a very strong reason to believe that once we get to AGI, we get superintelligence and it becomes smarter than us and our future depends on it, we want to make sure that doesn't happen. We want to make sure we don't get psychopathic superintelligences. And that's a really hard problem, but we have to work on it. Now, the good news is there are now 4 existential risk organisations in the world, 2 of them in this country, one at Oxford, one at Cambridge, which have got very smart people working on this problem. The problem of how you control an AI, and if you can't control it, how you set up its motivations in the first place so that it doesn't become psychopathic. It's a big problem. It will take years to solve. It's good that we've got started.
Okay. Any more? Yeah, great.
All I really want to say is, what happens when all this stuff breaks?
Yeah, what happens when this stuff breaks?
Oh, right.
It sort of feels inevitable, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, well, when we talk about artificial intelligence, I feel like everyone's, we kind of imagine it to have created itself, and it's like humans control how far this thing will go, how great it will be, and if it breaks, it will find a way to develop it so that if it breaks, we can fix it or it can fix itself. So it's kind of hard to talk about it because we haven't come across that problem yet, and it's not something we're dealing with now, but I believe there will be a way for it to fix itself or for it to be fixed quickly enough for us to use. It's about as much as I can give you.
No, that's fine. Let's just try and get another couple of questions in if we can.
Saffron, you mentioned about AI not showing empathy.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask all of you guys if you thought that will AI ever be able to show empathy? Will there be a stage where it can show empathy? And your opinions on that?
Well, when I was kind of like doing my research into creativity and AI in that sense, because it's made up of algorithms and coding, and I think empathy comes from an understanding of your experiences. As I said, it's about embodying the experience and the relationship between people, and I think that that's going to be something that's hard to develop and make. So right now, I think that is very far off for us to create.
Okay, let's see if we can do one more question.
My question was, how do you think AI will affect an everyday person's privacy in their everyday life?
Calum?
Yeah, privacy is going to be an increasingly important issue for the rest of the century, and to be honest, I don't really know which side of that debate I come down on. In some ways, we are valuing privacy too highly. The Ebola epidemic could have been sorted out much earlier if the phone companies had released the records of where everybody was travelling in the affected regions. So we allowed people to die because of phone company record privacy. Personally, I've never come across a time when surrendering my privacy was a problem, but I'm sure it could happen, and I'm fully aware of the possibility of a repressive government, which, and I don't want them to have my data. So there's lots of very difficult decisions, and I don't think we know the answer yet.
Okay. Time is up. Just before we sort of finish this session, this is the one thing that really struck me when you were talking about creativity and the fact that probably AI will struggle to, take over from humans. Is there a test? Is there a sort of like a Turing test for creativity? Because I'm sure that I've seen examples of things like poems, where you just read like 10 poems and 5 of them have been written by AI and 5 of them have been written by people. It's pretty hard to tell.
I know, but there's different levels of creativity. There's something called combinatory creativity, which is you can have a wealth of information and you can create combinations, which gives you an idea of creativity. But
And so unique combinations, but
but
I see.
they can't create something brand new. As I was saying, with the creative process, it shows humans can have an inspirational moment where they create new information that can help them.
I've got a video for you. We'll trade videos.
Yeah.
Which shows a computer doing just that. I'm sorry, DeepMind system, which has been taught to play Atari video games from scratch, came up with an entirely new way to play blocker, or Pong, I can't remember what the game's called. It sent the ball round the back.
Yeah.
And no human, as far as we know, had ever done that before. It was an entirely new invention. I think the distinction is, and you're right, there is a distinction. AIs, until they become AGIs and conscious, they can't have an interior life.
Yeah.
Therefore, they can't create art.
Yeah.
They can be creative, and
Of
that
course,
combinatorial creativity as an example, but they can't yet be artistic.
Yeah.
Just join me in thanking one last time Alan, Calum and Saffron.